This is the Dynamist Podcast, giving you the strategies and mindset to achieve complete freedom. Freedom to pursue the purpose for which God has called you to fight for. First, by achieving financial freedom as the essential foundation for unlocking what is known as philosophical freedom. As David Geffen says, we are each the figment of our own imagination, and some people have a greater ability to imagine than others. In this episode, we are going to talk all about investing in small multifamily properties using joint venture partnerships. We get the treat of hearing from the CEO of GoBundance Women, Mandy McAllister, on why door counts of 5 to 50 units from small mom and pop owners are the blue ocean of opportunity. We discuss what to look for in a good deal, how to form an advantageous partnership, and how larger agency debt can be the momentum behind your journey. My name is Tim Garul, and I'm an entrepreneur on the journey of freedom. I've lost my economic stability for standing up for my beliefs, and now I'm building passive income so I never have to compromise my values for a paycheck. This podcast is your roadmap to join me. So if you want to remove your limiting beliefs, unlock a fruitful life, and truly become free, let's go get to the next level together. Welcome into the Dynamist Podcast this week, guys. We have a special treat, a rare treat. I don't know why, but we just haven't had that many female guests on the podcast. And so it's really refreshing to have a female in the studio, but not only a female, a heavy-hitting, high-achieving badass. I've mentioned this several times before. I grew up with a mom who was just an outstanding example of what hard work should be. She really formed a lot of the principles I have about hard work. And so I have a lot of respect for you ladies out there who are reaching and striving for more. It really speaks to me and speaks to my background. And it always makes me just think about how grateful I am to have grown up with a mom who demonstrated those sorts of principles. So I love having women in the studio who are doing big things. And we're kind of going full circle. We've had the CEO of GoBundance with Matt King in here. And today we get the special treat of having the CEO of GoBundance, the women's chapter. And so we have Mandy McAllister in the studio today, and we're going to talk a lot about joint ventures in small multifamilies. But first, let me just give you Mandy's intro, and then we'll jump into the conversation. So Mandy McAllister is a multifamily real estate investor. She's a mindset ninja and a connector. She spent the bulk of her career in medical device sales and chasing cases and commission checks. But in 2021, Mandy left her W-2 to lean on the financial independence she built through real estate investing. Mandy now serves as the CEO of GoBundance Women, a tribe of healthy, wealthy, generous women who choose to lead epic lives. Her real estate expertise includes repositioning underperforming assets to increase cash flow and value. Her portfolio is currently comprised of 373 doors of Class B workforce housing, furnished student housing, and a motel reposition. So she is a mother. How many kids do you have, Mandy?
I made one, and I've got 2 bonus ones on top of it.
I love it. I'm part of a bonus family as well, so a lot of respect. Mandy, welcome to the Dynamist Podcast.
Hi, I'm thrilled to be here, Tim. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, this is really fun. We've had both CEOs of GoBundance in the Dynamist studio, so what a special treat.
Well, I'm thrilled to be here. I know you had a good conversation with Matt, so excited to chat live here.
We did, yeah. And actually, I think maybe this is a great starting place before we jump into the meat and potatoes, the main conversation that we're going to get into. Could you just give the audience a little bit of context? I do occasionally get questions about GoBundance Women. Could you give some context on, what's similar and what's different about GoBundance Women, and who's it really for?
Sure. The women that we serve are, entrepreneurs. So, GoBundance, the men's division, kind of was born of this group of guys who wanted to live intentionally. And I actually learned of GoBundance through one of our male counterparts in 2017 before there was a women's division. And as of 2020, the women's division started to help women who want to achieve the same sort of full life contentment, the chance to pay attention to, yes, financial freedom, but it's about so much more than that. It's how are you giving back? Does that feel authentic? How is your body? All of those things. So the same pillars that serve the men serve the women, but we just have conversations about what it means to be a feminine energy in that same space.
Yeah, I think that's so important and really powerful. As a girl dad myself, it's refreshing to have these types of outlets for I just know, forecasting on the horizon of what's available to my own daughter. Of course, you want them to have the same, the same resources that you have and that you're entitled to. And so it's awesome to hear that this is up and running, and it is smaller, isn't it? How many members are in the women's GoBundance?
We're about 130 members, but there's a special
Totally.
intimacy that comes with that too. So there's wins on both sides, but there is a lot of business stuff where we overlap with the men's side. So on the micro tribe conversations, the specific conversations about a business niche or a specific thing that we'd be talking about, the micro tribes do often overlap.
Yeah, and I've noticed that when I've sat in micro tribe meetings and things like that, I've noticed more of a presence of women in there, it's just cool. It's because you get, I guess, the full circle, well-rounded viewpoint, which isn't really important, I think, when you're trying to be balanced. And being an entrepreneur is all about surrounding yourself with people who, maybe strengthen a weakness that you have, has a vision where you may be blind. And so I just think it's just a net positive when we can, bounce different ideas and vantage points off of one another to complete the circle where we may be falling short,
Yeah, it's the whole circle of, if you've hired a coach or a guru, they're a hammer and they teach you how to see nails. Right. But if you're shoulder to shoulder with other people doing big things, you might think about things a little bit differently.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for giving that context and background. And if anybody's interested in reaching out to Mandy and learning more about GoBundance Women, I'm going to put all her information in the show notes below. And of course, at the end of the episode, I'm going to make her tell you guys how you can get a hold of her. But don't worry, fear not. All of her information is going to be in the show notes. So if you are an entrepreneur woman or have a wife who is out there go getting it, I'm going to make sure that there's an outlet for you to get in touch. It's just a great organization. I can't say enough good things about GoBundance. Okay, let's talk about joint ventures in small multifamily buildings. I'm assuming you didn't start in small multifamilies. Is that correct?
I started with a fourplex.
Okay.
So entry-level multifamily.
Yes. Oddly enough, my first true investment property was also a fourplex. Where was your fourplex located?
By Illinois State University. It's about 2 hours from where I live in Chicagoland.
Okay. Awesome. So once you bought that first fourplex, did you just go all in with small multis, or did you dabble at all in like smaller single-family residentials?
So I saw the immediate scale that I got. I had been so interested in investing for decades before I really jumped in. And then when I did and saw that I was cash flowing $1,000 a month and I didn't die from having done the transaction, I wanted to add a zero. So I figured out how can I put this scale to good use immediately. Yeah.
So let's start off with, really, I guess, giving some context. What do you consider a small multifamily?
Sure. I say it's about 5 units to 50 units. Because if you're looking at the institutional buyers, the groups that are going to syndicate, usually they're looking for about 100 units or more. But if you're looking in something that's too small for those groups, but too large for your mom and pop investors, I think there's this beautiful Goldilocks that doesn't get a ton of attention, but has a lot of the benefits of the larger multis.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like, it's kind of under that stone that the big guys aren't really looking under and the smaller guys can't really compete for just yet. So there's a lot of what we call blue ocean of opportunity in that asset class. Now, are you obviously you're partnering on these deals? As far as like the proportion of your portfolio, do you own any of these outright, or all of these multifamilies primarily, connected to some sort of a joint venture partnership?
The biggest thing I own on my own is a 10 unit.
Okay, awesome.
The 18, the 38, the 53, the 104 are all in partnership.
Okay. And I'm setting the foundation here because I want to get into a little bit more niche questions. So I really want to kind of set the stage for the launch point of the conversation to grow increasingly more complex. So when you bought that first 4 unit, how long was it until you saw the writing on the wall and took action on the second and subsequent properties?
The next transaction was a 6 unit, and I bought it within 6 months.
Within 6 months.
I had been bitten by the bug, Tim. I realized that a chance to lean on that cash flow was going to really tremendously change my life.
Awesome. Okay. And on that second purchase that you went for, was that a partnership or was that solo?
Solo.
Awesome.
Yep. I
Okay.
was able to use equity in a different building so that I ended up bringing no money down essentially to buy a six.
I love stories like that. Okay. So where in the journey did you maybe run out of money or have the enlightening moment of, I think I can go a lot faster with partnerships?
It was more so the type of debt that I could get. Learning of agency debt, the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac investment grade vehicles that allow for non-recourse, so meaning I'm not personally liable when I buy these larger properties. You just have to borrow more than $1 million, and I wasn't in a spot to do all that by myself. So I found a couple of partners who were interested in the same type of asset as I was. So we ran after Fannie Mae debt.
Okay. So let's interject here with I guess one of the foundational questions that will really, like I said, carry the rest of this conversation. Can you just give the audience a quick comparison between something like a syndication versus a joint venture?
Absolutely. So actually, when you start kind of getting into larger multifamily, syndication is the route that ends up being the preferred thing to teach you. And I joined a group that looked at syndication. So basically what a syndication is it's a large property where a group called the general partnership comes together and gets people to pool their money, the limited partners that bring only capital, to sell off 70 or 80% of the deal. So the general partnership keeps 30 or 20% of the deal. The limited partnerships who come with the money get to buy off shares to the tune of 70 or 80%.
Yeah. And just to, I guess, in case there's anybody listening that hasn't been listening to the show for a long time, when she's talking about general partners and limited partners, they're all owners in one single deal. So she says, they give away 70 to 80% of the deal. Those are limited partners, meaning they brought their cash. They all own the deal. Those are what's called passive investors, meaning that they have no active management role. They're not out there force appreciating units. They're not making, debt restructure decisions. They simply believe in an asset, believe in an operator, and they're putting their capital into the deal. And as a reward for that, they're receiving proportionally the majority of the equity and the appreciation. The general partners are the people that are boots on the ground, making the decisions. They're like the generals in the military, making the out in the field decisions, really forcing the value to appreciate, making sure that the rent rolls are, market, and that the investors, their first and foremost job is to make sure that the investors are not only recouping their initial investment, but also making the return that they promised they would get. So the GP, active management, LP, passive investor, and that is what we call a syndication model. There's a million ways you could do it. There's a million syndicators out there who have all kinds of debt stacks and deal structures, but that is a syndication. So as a limited partner, you pay your money. You're entitled to a certain percentage of equity in that deal and cash flow attached to that, and that's that. Now, let's define the difference in a joint venture.
Mm-hmm. So joint venture is when two people are active in a deal. So 2, 3, 4 people come into a deal. They all bring capital. They're all active. The primary difference between a syndication and a joint venture is every person involved has to have an active role in a joint venture, because the Securities and Exchange Commission says that if you take someone's money and you promise a return, you have sold a security, and you have to do lots of different paperwork to have an exemption through the SEC, and that's what defines a syndication. So active role is a big piece of it.
So, this kind of leads into my next segue of a question here is like, what are the pros and cons of going with a joint venture versus a syndication? That's one big one you hit on right there. If you're raising capital, you have to file with the SEC, depending on how, who the capital is coming from. But can you go over just, I guess, a little bit about pros and cons and what led you towards joint venture as opposed to syndications?
So when I looked at syndications, which is really the path of education that I went down, I realized that, actually the 104 unit in Louisville, Kentucky, I did is a syndication. And I did a ton of work, and I raised $1 million, and I'm consistently involved in the management of that deal. And I own 5% of the general partnership. I own 5% of 30%. So the math on that, Tim, is that I own 1.8% of that deal. So 1.8% of 104 units is a duplex. So why am I more impressed with that percentage of ownership in that deal than I am in my 6 and 4s that throw off way more cash flow than that? So I realized that if I had, one, the willingness to do work, and two, some capital, because I came from a pretty good job that I had a ton of savings that I wanted to throw into this. So I had money and interest in doing work. It was kind of a competitive advantage that I was able to dive into JVs so that I got to be what I call an equity hog and own a lot more of that deal.
Yeah, I think so that we hear a lot of investors, they talk about, hey, I'd rather have a slice of a watermelon than, a whole grape to myself. But I think, especially in the market that we're in right now, there's something to be said about the hybrid, right? Like maybe dividing a small watermelon into 4 equal parts is more advantageous than, having a slice or a single grape to yourself. And I just think, the reason that this is clearly working for you is because it's heading in a direction where I guess it's contrary to the majority of the investor population. And typically when you look throughout history, the people who are the most successful, the people who have the most advantage are almost never going in the same direction as the flow of everybody else. So I applaud you for having the tenacity and really the courage to really go after something that, isn't the clickbait hype that's not all over the investor podcast, that's not all over social media, and finding a competitive edge to get that done.
Well, I'll say I just realized that I had a different goal than these syndicators. When I looked at it, syndicators looked like they made a property prettier and sold it in a short amount of time. If you look in single family, there's buy and hold investors and there's flippers.
Right.
And the flippers make a property prettier and they sell it really quickly. In my opinion, syndicators have a lot in common with flippers, and you only get paid one time on flipping or on syndication. What I wanted was to build a floor of income that was reliable so that I could buy my way out of my W-2 so that I could live with real purpose in my life. And I didn't achieve that doing the syndications.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's very valid. And it sounds like to me you're a person that wants to hold a lot of assets in your portfolio for a long period of time. It's a long time horizon play, which, you brought up a great point with syndications is you're constantly shuffling that debt stack. It's like, okay, there's a capital event in 5 years where the investors are getting paid back either from a refinance or a sale. Well, now what? Now you have all this capital that you have to exchange or do a cost seg because you're going to pay a crap ton of tax. And now you're up against the clock of finding a new asset in a market that you believe in. And so, when you are holding these properties long-term, optimizing them, taking your time to exchange, and there's like a limited amount of partners, and, you don't have as much pressure from a, financial responsibility of paying investors back, you can make better decisions. If we look at some very famous historical examples of leaders, I'm just going to use one that sticks out to me right away. Christ, he was never in a hurry. He walked upright. He was calm. He took his time. He did not make rash decisions in a hurry. And there's something to be said about that and implementing that into your own life and your own tactics.
I love that. I also have a Charlie Munger quote that I heard that the win isn't made, the money isn't made in the buy, the money isn't made in the sell, the money is made in the wait. So if you can set yourself up to be in a good position to wait and living off of floor income that you can get from building a portfolio of small multis is one way to get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, let's dig into some of the deals. I would assume it sounds like you're a value add investor. Is that correct?
I like a fat cow. If I can buy something that's it's cash flowing in
right
place.
Right
off the bat, that's ideal. I love a class B, but I've done a lot of repositions. I think that's kind of necessary when you're getting into the game.
Okay. So let's define that. So, I mentioned value add, meaning like, hey, you have an underperforming asset that you've identified that you can come in and purchase at a discount, which is advantageous for you because you can force appreciate or improve basic things like, rent rolls or, just overall the efficiency, the cap rate of the property and force value. I mean, it's not unrealistic to think you could buy a multifamily building and add $1 million, $2 million in appreciated value just from some sweat equity. You mentioned you like to find cows, things that are spitting off money right now. And you mentioned, C-class properties. When you say C-class properties, immediately the hackles on the back of my neck go up. I'm thinking problems. I'm thinking expenses of maintenance and tenants and evictions. Why C-class, and what are you targeting that is a cow?
I look for B class.
Oh, B
I like
class.
yes, I like a B class asset that has value add strategies that are more on the management side. I call them non-construction risk value add. So if we're not charging a pet rent, if we're not charging parking, if we're if there's room for rent bumps, things like that. If there's room to bill back utilities that the owner is currently paying, that is the ultimate win, in my opinion.
Okay. So these properties that you're targeting, are these typically like legacy mom and pop owners that have had it for generations? How are you finding these properties? How are you sourcing these deals?
A couple of things here. One, the beauty of the approach that I've had is you don't need to be right. You don't need deal flow that you've got to do 5 of these a year. You don't need deal flow that you need to do even 1 of these a year if you've set yourself up right, right? So I do what I call buy and watch. What I'm holding, I'm watching the market to see if it makes sense to then sell. But also I'm leaning pretty heavily on brokers because brokers earn their money, and I've shown to groups in Indianapolis, which is where I largely buy, that we close on properties. So following very closely the couple of key brokers in a market, which I think is the ultimate way to get deal flow.
Yeah. Real estate is hyper relational. A lot of people, they build out these complex funnels that are, marketing, direct to seller, and ultimately, transactions happen from relationships, interpersonal relationships that come from just nurturing quality friendships over time. And some of my most favorite deals that I have in my portfolio have just come from relationships that I initially had no intent to do a transaction with. And I just cannot emphasize what you just said is so important. Build relationships. So how did you start building relationships with these brokers? You just reached out to them, said, hey, this is what I do. And how often are you keeping in touch with these brokers?
I actually started this whole game by starting a meetup because I had an itch that I wanted to scratch and I didn't know another human in the world who was buying multifamily. So in the suburbs of Chicago, I started to talk with people and actually met a guy who was a commercial broker in Chicago, and he became my business partner. So in a couple of these deals that we've done, I refer to him as my favorite business partner. But he knew guys that had been in Chicago that had moved down to Indianapolis. So that was a competitive advantage because he had these decades-long history with them. So aligning myself with people who are smarter and more entrenched than me has, it's the secret sauce to everything, right?
Yeah. I think that's a great point to expand upon. You said in a joint venture, everybody has a active role. In the beginning of the podcast, we were talking about the differences between syndications and joint ventures. Can you define some of those active roles? Because everybody isn't good at everything. Okay. People typically have, certain strengths and they also have certain weaknesses. And the key to a well-balanced team is supplementing your weaknesses with somebody who has a strength in that area of your weakness. So I would love if you kind of dove into, when we're forming a team to go after a joint venture opportunity, what are we looking for? And like, how are you setting up expectations to make sure that these teams are going to be successful? Partnerships are like marriages. They're very complex.
Yeah, I've been really right and I've been really wrong. So on the ones that I'm really right on, one kind of, I love an analogy. One analogy on this is if I'm willing to cook in a kitchen on Thanksgiving with that many people, then I'm willing to be in a joint venture with that many people, right? So if you're trying to come up with a job for an 11th person to join your JV, there is no way on God's green earth that you will come up with that job, right? But if one person turns into 2, turns into 3, then you will get more done faster, right? With the amount of capital that you can bring, the amount of expertise, so on and so forth. So I think it's very important that everyone first have the same time horizon and goals for a property. And second, be willing to come together to be active and do that work. So not too many people commitment to the same end.
Yeah, I guess, a lot of people who have a smaller down leg. Let's shift the conversation. I'm going to make it really personal. We're going to go right into my scenario. So, I started buying property 10 years ago, and I'm at a point where it's time to rebalance my portfolio. And I did it in a method that I think a lot of people should do. I house hacked, I lived in them, I moved out. I turned single families into, a rental portfolio using bank debt. Now it's time for me to reposition that down leg. I have a substantial amount of equity built up, and I'm starting this whole new venture of, okay, it's time for the next phase. What now? I think the biggest issue for me is identifying a partner to really go in on something with. I'm stewarding, let's say that I'm exchanging half of my properties, portfolio. That's a substantial nest egg for me that it's taken me a decade to build. What should I be looking for in a partnership? Who should I be identifying? How do I even start that process?
So I feel like the first thing you need to do is identify what you're great at. That, are you, what type of thing do you want to go after? And can you not do it alone? Because candidly, my ultimate goal is to be buying these types of properties that are big enough to get agency debt and property management on them that will be, serve the life that I want to have alone. So the fewer partners you can have, the better. So one thing in terms of people that I messed up in partnership with, I had a guy steal $110,000 from me. So if I would have done a Google search, a background search on this man, it would have become clear. It would have been very obvious that I should not touch this man or partnership with him with a 10-foot pole, right? So do a background search. Ask them. My favorite hack is if you do a background search, you're going to come up with something that's like, you had a speeding ticket 15 miles over 10 years ago. Well, if I confront you with something that maybe you're embarrassed about, then I have now constructed a time where you need to show up with a clear head, or you can fly off the handle. And if I see you in real time, either communicating with me well or acting like a jerk, then I'm going to know how you're going to act in partnership, right? I also love just talking to people who have done deals with someone. Another one, I would have known that, one of my partners that I took on, she had been fired by everyone that I knew, right? If I would have had that conversation, I would have been able to consider it differently. So do your due diligence on previous partnerships and backgrounds.
What would you say that your strength is in a partnership?
I'm great with people. I'm great at thinking a couple of steps ahead. I know that I'm not awesome at details. So when it comes to GoBundance, what I needed was an integrator. If you've not read Traction or the EOS books, I needed someone who was so into the details that they could make beautiful the ideas that are getting started in front of us. So I guess the big picture.
Okay, that's exactly who I am. I like to go make a mess, cast a big vision. It's so easy for me to rally people up, get them excited. Let's go. And then I'm like, oh man, somebody's got to clean all this up now. So what was your pitch? Because you clearly have found partnerships that are fruitful and are working. What was your value add to these integrators who have come alongside you, who have seen your vision and have been willing to partner with you in growing this venture? What was your value add to them?
Largely, we're hiring the integrators, right? So the property managers that are really good at the details, that we can develop together the dashboard that I need to see for the high level details. In the GoBundance stuff, when we were hiring an operations manager, I had them in the hiring process. Every person who was applying, I had them do the visionary integrator assessment that came from the website. It's a free thing on the website. Pretty common to submit a disc back your disc score, but I had them submit that too. So I knew someone with a really high integrator love for the details and making things happen was the teammate I was choosing.
Well, this is an interesting point that you're bringing up. You said you're hiring the integrators, which leads me to believe that the other partners in your joint ventures are also more visionaries.
Honestly, I've never seen the results of their tests. Definitely the guy I call my favorite business partner, who's actually a GoBro too. He might be a little more integrator than visionary, but he's probably a good balance of the two.
Yeah.
But end of the day, if you have a big idea, you can either give away a big chunk of your deal, or you can hire the right people to get that job done underneath you and keep the larger slice of the pie. It's riskier, but it's the path that I'm choosing right now.
So that's what you're doing then and guy, by the way, guys, if you're listening, joint ventures, real estate, deal making, it's horse trading. And what I mean is you can literally make it however you want to make it. You can divide it up however you want to make it. You could set up roles. As long as it works for you, everybody has a clear understanding of their role and responsibility, and everybody is communicating well and feels happy, you can do whatever you want to do. I am curious, Mandy, how are your deals structured? How are your partnerships structured?
One thing that I was careful to do was if you come in, let's say, Tim, that you bring $1 million to a deal and I bring $0 and we're 50-50 partners. Well, in the eyes of the IRS, the day that we buy that property, I have had a taxable event of $500,000, right? So if I'm the guy who doesn't have the dollars to bring to a deal, then I probably don't have the dollars to pay the taxes on that $500,000, right? So we've been very careful to structure things such that it's, a dollars in commensurate initial ownership. And then we've had, profit sharing things built in as we've gone. Also on the first one, we took an asset management fee. So one of my business partners and I, we brought 100,000, another guy brought $1 million. So 100,000, 100,000 million. So the two of us own 10% of that deal to get started, and the other guy owns 80%. Well, in order to get more cash flow, we take an asset management fee on it. But, one thing I'll tell you, while I'm thinking about it, I think this is so important. It totally shapes the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing now. My paycheck on that deal with 10% ownership is about $2,000 a month. The guy who brought $1 million, his is about $18,000 or $20,000 a month. So if I can structure things that I can come up with a pile of cash, 500,000, $1 million, to throw into a deal like this that I know works on, that is belt and suspenders, non-recourse debt backed. It's the safest possible thing in the world to invest in. That is the path I want to go. So how can I be the sole owner or the large owner of a deal like that?
So essentially, you're using joint venture partnerships as a lever to move the bigger rock down the line. This is for you to build up a big enough portfolio so you can go to the bank and sign for this larger debt. You don't need to take partners to help you sign for like bigger amounts of debt. What types of properties are you targeting? What types of projects are you targeting that this is what you're working towards?
Yeah. So I believe real firmly that you cannot be an absolute expert in many locations at a time. So I know that when I was first trying to go bigger, I was deciding between Kansas City and Indianapolis, and I FOMO'd, but they're doing this, but they're doing that, and I could do 0.02% better on I FOMO'd my way to nothing for a couple of years. So the thing that matters to me is, can I know that this rent works on this block, and I know that it doesn't work on the next block? So the couple of Indianapolis markets that I buy in is where I'm looking to double down. Also, one thing that matters a lot, and a reason that the larger syndicators will say only seek out something that's 100 units or more, is because you can afford for one person to be your property manager, a full-time person, eyes on your prize, making sure something goes well. On my 6 unit, it's a gong show trying to get people to look at things. And I got to talk to this person for renting and this person for rehab. And I am segmented. I don't have one person's eyes on it. However, on the 53 unit, instead of saying, it doesn't bring in enough to have someone on site Monday through Friday, but it brings in enough that we can have her on site Tuesday and Thursday. So I have the same human's brain working on the problem on a regular basis. That is the real win in terms of scale for property management.
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And I can absolutely relate because, my portfolio is piecemealed all over the place in different markets because I'm like, I think this could be better here. And I was very opportunistic. And now I'm realizing all I did is make a headache for myself that now I have to clean up and go bigger, which is great because it got me in the game. I appreciate it over time and I'm ready to go to the next level. And you learn, this is if you don't ever start, you cannot learn these lessons. But I'm absolutely living proof of what you're talking about right now. And I can tell you, it's painful communicating with subcontractors and managing the managers and checking in on, 5 different property management logins. So can we do what I would like to go into next is let's just do a hypothetical deal that looks really tasty to you. So, you have a partnership and I want to talk about, price points that you're really targeting. We can talk about why this deal would be interesting. It's a total hypothetical. What your plan to improve would be, how you're coming up with, the capital for it, what type of debt you're looking for it, and then what's the long-term trajectory. I know we don't have like an actual deal, but I would love just to kind of get inside your mind of what are you looking for? What looks tasty? What's a cow to you?
Awesome. Sure. So I think the actual asset in these deals is the loan. And people thought it was crazy when they were syndicating and I was locking in a 12-year Fannie Mae loan at 3%, right? But I don't look so dumb anymore, right? So end of the day, if I can, another thing too is if you're looking in multifamily in the 5, 8, 10 unit space and you would need to borrow, let's say $700,000, you're going to have to go to a bank. And when you're at that bank, you're going to make a relationship with a banker and you're going to get one term sheet. And if you want to compare that to something, you go to a second bank and you build a relationship with that banker. And now you get a second term sheet. And now you have two that you can look at. It is so incredibly fragmented. You're probably going to get a 20-year amortization. So you're going to pay a much bigger slice and a much higher rate, right? So you can get a much better loan. It's so backwards, but until you've done it, you don't believe it, that going bigger makes it easier. So for me, one of the things that really helps me choose the size that I go after, I have to borrow at least $1 million. The loan balance needs to be at least $1 million. So if we're talking 75% loan to value, that means my purchase price needs to be in the neighborhood of 1.5 million, right?
Right.
Okay. So that is my kind of first prerequisite. I don't want to borrow less than that because I end up in that black hole of lending that is ridiculous to play in, right? Second, I want something class B because the deferred maintenance on a class C is not something that I have the bandwidth to deal with. I want something class B. I want something that I would live in if I were 23 again. You know, I want something that I'm proud to represent, that we're going to do good things with. And I need it to be enough doors that a third party property manager will give me someone on site at least 2 days a week. So generally speaking, I think that needs to be about 30 units. In my experience, 30 units there's something that helps me have enough wiggle room to negotiate that around 30 units. So I want it to be in a place that is experiencing growth for the big three that I always talk about. I need it to have population growth, I need it to have job growth, and I need it to have GDP growth, right? So that is still areas of Indianapolis because people are fleeing Illinois because we don't know how to run a state. So people are headed into Indianapolis. So largely, it needs to be that size. It needs to be that caliber of asset. Also, if I see that it could experience this, what I call non-construction risk value add, which is really just management plays. Like I love when I can put in a RUBS, a ratio utility bill back system. So if I'm paying for water and heat, how can I bill that back to my tenants? I love when there's no pet rent being charged. I love when there's no parking being charged. And obviously, if I'm going to do this, I need to be an expert in the market and know if a RUBS has never been charged before in your area and you're the first one to do it, you're probably not going to get as strong a demand as you think, right? So if I know that it is happening in the market, then it's going to be much easier to implement. So that's what a cow looks like to me, because I can get the best possible debt. I can improve NOI by doing things that aren't going to mess with my occupancy, that aren't going to cost me an arm and a leg. And if a COVID happens again and lumber is now 12 times what it used to be, I don't need to feel that pain in order to achieve that increase in NOI.
So essentially, I mean, you're looking for properties that you don't have to do a ton of heavy lifting to force appreciate to make cash flow. They're deals that you could buy as is today, and it services the debt. And how much income how much cash flow are you looking for these properties to spit off?
Great question. So kind of strategically, looking at the numbers, the underwriting stuff is something that in commercial investing, this is the name of the game. So if you're just, I'm not a numbers guy, it doesn't really do it. You got to be a numbers person in order to do well in this. So when I underwrite first pass, I want to look at in place rents with what would actually be happening if I took it over in terms of taxes and insurance and all of the things that will explode when I buy it. And I need to pay a price that will get me a debt coverage ratio of 1.25. Once I've done that, then I look at what a year two scenario would be. If I can achieve a RUBS, if I can achieve a pet rent, I look at that compared to what my actual spend will be, a reasonable spend will be. And then if I'm able to achieve a cash on cash of 10% or more by year two, double digit cash flow by year two is the thing that I say kind of ad nauseum for the things that I chase.
Yeah, I think that is really great perspective there. So you're looking at the deal, you're looking at what kind of bank debt, and then you're factoring in an increase in expenses that a lot of people don't factor in. Like when you purchase it, it's now evaluated at the higher tax rate. Insurance, by the way, has gone insane this year. So insurance is up. Does the deal still pencil? And if you do these simple value adds, bringing rents up to market, charging back for utilities and parking, can you at least get 10% of your cash out of this deal? Now, if it doesn't meet that requirement, then are you taking that back to the seller and saying, listen, I really want to make this deal, but you have to understand, I can't pay this price. And are you seeing some negotiating, some softening on that based, separate from just like paying what the cap rate says it's worth? Because, with bank debt, are you getting some movement, some leverage there?
4 years ago, yes. Right now, the price discovery just isn't happening. And that's why so few transactions have gone through in 2023 and so far in 2024. I think it's going to happen. It has to happen at some point, But end of the day, another beauty of this approach is I don't have to be right every year. I was able to sit on my hands. I was able to go seek out another way of gaining cash flow. I actually bought a car wash this last year because it was interesting. It looked like, so if, basically the thought there is if I'm going to buy at a 4 cap, it's, NOI divided by value, I'm basically saying I'll pay $25 for $1 of cash flow if I buy at a 4 cap, right? I realized if I buy something that's a business that's real estate heavy, I can pay 3x EBITDA. So I pay $3 for $1 of cash flow rather than paying $25 for $1 of cash flow. So if what I want is that $1 million pile of cash to go buy the big thing myself a couple of times in my life, it's easier if I do it with heavier cash flow. So I didn't find anything multifamily.
Yeah. That's a great input. And by the way, if this is the first episode that you're ever turning into this podcast, I apologize because we are kind of talking higher level terms. I'll explain EBITDA later, but essentially it's just a way to evaluate cash flow off of a business. And you mentioned one other thing that I'm trying. Oh, cap rate. Cap rate is just a way to evaluate performance of a building. Typically lower cap rates. Essentially, like let's say it's a return on your money. Let's say you put $100,000 into a deal at a 4 cap, you should be getting about 4% back on your investment. However, lower cap rates tend to be more risky because they need more improvement. A 10 cap is like more optimized. Go ahead.
A high cap rate tends to have more risk associated with it.
Sorry.
But at the end of the day, no troubles.
Yeah. So there's risk associated with different ends of the cap rate spectrum. So if you're just listening in, I'll do a breakdown of all of these in the future, so I apologize. Let's go back to the debt stack. So you identify like a 1.5 million building. You're getting 75% LTV on this building. So how much capital? I don't have a calculator in front of me. That means you have to come with how much down?
So it's so much dependent on what Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac's appetite is at that point. Will you get 75% loan to value? I'm not totally sure. So what would that be? 251, 375 would be, right? 25%.
Yeah. So you said 275, you said? 1.5 million.
Carry the 2.
Times. We're doing math live here.
I've been drilling 4th grade math facts.
So 375. So you need to come up with at 75% LTV. You need to come up with 375,000 down. That's not including closing costs or anything like that. So my question to you is now, okay, you have partners that you've identified for a deal like this. In your mind right now, how are you structuring this? How much capital do you want to come with? How much do you want your partners to come with? I know this is all hypothetical. I'm just trying to get into your mindset here. I want to understand how you think.
So I think that another thing that I've learned is there always has to be one person in charge. If there's more, like, again, those cooks in the kitchen, there has to be someone where the buck stops. So ideally, if I'm going to take on a partner again, it's going to be someone at a lesser percentage. So I would want to bring the bulk of that money. I like when the number of dollars in is commensurate to the percentage ownership. So if I bring 60% of the dollars, you bring 40% of the dollars, because I don't want to mess with the taxable event that would occur if we do some differing percentage.
Got it. So you like whatever capital somebody brings is proportional to their ownership in that deal. I do have, like, I know we're running out of time here. How much, when you purchase a property, how much reserves, like on a 1.5 million, how much are you setting aside in reserves up front before you even close on this property?
great question. So the loan product will determine, they will tell you what they need to see. And that usually feels very belt and suspenders. So it's usually 9 months is what I saw most recently of principal and interest, the debt service.
And are you comfortable with that, or do you like to be more conservative than that? Do you like to set aside more? Like, is there, based off of, the asset class, do you like to have, hey, I want at least this much in a war chest in the event of?
It depends on how many more things that are kind of up for grabs that I have going on at the same time. I feel very firm about my floor and the reserves that I have for, supporting that floor of income, that the assets that I currently own. If I were going to take down 2 deals at the same time, I would want to see kind of a higher proportion because, more things can go wrong. Yeah,
no, it's great insight. Yeah, I had a moment of real estate dyslexia. A higher cap rate is more risky. You are able to, have a better return on your money. However, you carry much more risk. Things could go wrong. With a lower cap rate, you tend to have more stabilized properties. I do this all the time. I mix my cap rates up all the time in common conversation. Okay, what has been like some of the we'll end with this. What would you say are like some of your biggest takeaways, your biggest learns of lessons that when you look back on these types of ventures, they've really stuck with you and they've really, impacted you on your journey forward?
I think the single greatest epiphany that I've had in this whole investing game is it's just a math problem. If you want to buy your way out of a job so that you can go live a life of greater purpose, which is the thing that I admire most about what it is that you stand for, Tim, is the chance to invest is a chance to live with full authenticity, to put my time into things that fill me up, that feed the world, that empower people, right? So it is a math problem to figure out what you need that floor of income. I made a calculator for it that I'd be thrilled to link to for anybody who's interested, because the minute that you realize that you've hit one level or another level or this great level of financial freedom, your life opens up. The chance to choose how you spend your days changes.
Yeah, I could not echo that more. And what a great way to end the episode. I would love to include that calculator. So go ahead and send that after we're done recording, send that over and I'll make sure that's available to the audience, however that may be through maybe your social media or whatever. Mandy, this has been an incredible interview, super insightful for me. I'm kind of on the precipice of choosing a path in the road. Do I go like triple net commercial that's more hands off? Do I do some, value add? What am I going to do when I transition from my down leg and go look bigger? So this has been selfishly incredibly helpful to me, and thank you very much for this insightful conversation. I really hope that we can connect in person at some GoBundance event in the future. Where can people get in touch with you? Where can they find you? How can they learn more about you?
The best way to find me on all my social media handles, go through my website, mandymcallister.com, and we'll get you the link for the calculator too, because that's been a pretty cool thing to see.
Perfect. And I'm going to have all of her clickable links in the show notes below, her website, her social media, all of that. So make sure that you scroll down and take a look. Mandy, thank you so much. Everybody in the Dynamist world, I hope you got some value and some insight from this episode. We will catch you all on the flip side. See you next week.